2-1, this is 2-2. Coast looks clear. Let's roll out. Over.
Copy. I'm on the way. Thank you. All right, let's get moving. We got a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
Oh. You forget to purify your water again?
Oh, dude, those freaking MREs, dude.
Oh, let me guess. Beef patties?
Yeah, I'll be all right. Actually, I don't know if I'm good, man. There's like this back. I haven't farted in like 3 days. There's like this backlog of logs in my intestines sideways, and there's like a bubble of gas on top, and I can feel it. I can even push it, and it doesn't just like, it won't come out anywhere.
Huh. Well, peek right, push left.
I'm done with that. Let's just go.
Huh.
Carry on.
You gotta warn me before you do that next time. I thought you saw something. Damn.
And that is called crop dusting. Feels so much better. You know, by the way, when you smell that, you're actually breathing in fecal matter particles that came straight out of my...
Oh! Drew, stay down! Drew, stay down!
I'm good, I'm good. It's just got my pack.
Stay down!
Get this off me! Get this off me! Oh, good.
Stay low, stay low. All right, good. We're gonna stay low, crawl to the edge of this crop right here, get down in the death blade. We can get around into his blind spot.
All right, let's go. I'm gonna rip one, dude.
No, don't.
Oh, I can't stop it. I can't stop it.
No. Oh.
I feel so much better now. Your gear and your training don't matter at all if the enemy has thermal optics or thermal drones. Well, at least that's what a lot of comment sections will make you think. The truth of the matter is that while thermal is an absolute game changer, there is no technology that is without flaws, and you can beat thermal.
So today we're going to be comparing and contrasting thermal mitigation techniques ranging from $24 all the way up to $500 plus. We're going to be evaluating these both in a static and a mobile situation with both a eye level, so a handheld rifle mounted thermal, and a thermal drone looking top down. But we're not being invaded today, and we're probably not going to be invaded tomorrow, so why even spend our time talking about all this?
Warfare evolves, and the men who founded our country believe that citizens should possess the same arms and the same information as our own government. So in that regard, being well versed on thermals and how to defeat them is just a part of American heritage, in our opinion. Now, thermal warfare is not future warfare. It is today warfare. And war often stands on the shoulders of things that came before. For example, in World War I, the machine gun was fielded for the first time on a broad scale. And at the time, a lot of people didn't really understand, especially leadership, didn't understand how to properly employ that technology. And as a result, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives were wasted needlessly on all sides of the conflict. But by the time World War II came around, there was a wide understanding of proper MG usage and also how to counter it. The same is true with thermals and drones. While Ukraine saw the rise of thermals and drones on the battlefield, as the years wear on, people are starting to understand the limitations and how to counter that kind of tech.
Now, we have spent a lot of time with numerous different thermals playing around in urban environments, around and even under the water. We have experimented in the forests, under different biomes, different temperatures, and we have gathered a lot of our own knowledge and experience.
Now, before we get into the spicy stuff, we gotta say thank you to you guys for loving us and for hitting that free sub button. You've made us so popular that we got awesome sponsors from companies whose stuff we actually use, which is great. The first of those is WetWrx. We did not mean to be a walking WetWrx billboard out here on this project, but like we have so much of their products on, it's kind of crazy. I've got this 7-panel chest rig on, which I've built out to be a part of my auto rifleman loadout, which we'll talk about in a future video. But it is an incredible piece of kit that's super simple, super affordable as far as chest rigs go, and I absolutely love it. We also use their scrim, the Wraith hoodie that we have in this video. They're an incredible company. We love them. Check them out. Now this video is about thermal mitigation. However, the things that emit a lot of thermal signature are electronics and equipment. And as far as that goes, whenever we go out into the field, one of us always has something from Silent. Silent is known for premium quality Faraday bags / dry bags. And this is one that we've used a lot. It doesn't look brand new. It looks kind of roughed up because, well, we use it for stuff. And this is what we'll put our extra electronics in, or we'll scale down to a smaller version of this to put smaller devices in. If you're looking for a way to protect sensitive equipment and electronics, not just from a potential EMP or whatever, if you just want to keep it dry and protected, their dry bags are like, they're second to none. So check them out, link in the description.
Next, guys, we have Avon Protection. So this is their half mask respirator. This is called the Mylar, and it's a newer product from them. But as soon as we got it, we started, you know how when you see a car that your buddy drives, you start to see that car everywhere? Well, when I saw a half face respirator from Avon, I started to see all the scenarios where I'm shooting suppressed, auto riflemen, or going into schools that have been flooded and there's a whole ton of mold, and realizing how important it is to have a tool like this, not a full gas mask, but just being able to protect my lungs and my respiratory system. So if you are looking for a good quality half mask respirator, go check out the Mylar from Avon Protection. Link is in the description.
So before we get into the testing, we need to bust the big anti-thermal myth, which is if I just hide my body heat, I'm all good. I can use a Mylar blanket, or I can just hide behind glass. Well, yes, but no. The truth is, effective thermal mitigation is a blend of several different concepts that often get glazed over or just left out entirely on a lot of thermal content that you may watch, including some of our own. So we're gonna hop into those. The first one being heat barriers.
So a Mylar blanket, like Drew said, this is a heat barrier. You may even hear some people say, oh, I'll just throw an extra whoopee on, or a wool blanket, or a Mylar blanket, which is trapping a ton of heat right now. And while it does stop some heat, you could have the problem of overheating, like an Xbox 360 getting a red ring of death, because you are just trapping so much heat inside of your little shell.
Heat barriers is where most thermal content you may see on the internet stops. It begins and it ends there, but it goes a lot deeper than that. The next one is standoff and airflow. In other words, your thermal material, or whatever your heat barrier is, needs to stand off of your body in some way so that there's airflow. So this prevents the transfer of the heat from your body to the material.
So a great example of this is, you know how everyone says, well, thermal can't see through glass, it's its biggest weakness. Well, yes, that is true. It cannot see through the temperature that the pane of glass is. But when you throw a blanket over your head, it's almost like putting your hand up on that pane of glass. The temperature, the heat of your hand, or lack thereof, depending on how hot the glass is going to conduct and share that transfer of heat, and you will, over time, be able to see where that heat source is on the glass. Now that will also be true if I were to throw a blanket over my head directly on my head, my shoulders, my back, and as my body heats up over time, because it is trapping air, it is going to transfer to that material if the material is not able to off-gas or dump that extra temperature. So if you are doing some of your own anti-thermal testing, or you're watching someone else's content online, simply setting a blanket up over your head for 10 seconds for a quick shot of what that looks like on thermal is not a realistic test. You need to give that material time to transfer heat to that material, and maybe that material will do a good job of dumping that increase of temperature.
The third one is terrain blending. It's important to remember that every biome is different. Here in Tennessee, it is smoking hot right now at noon, but in the morning times it's cool, and at night times it gets a little cooler, obviously. And what the thermal sees and how well our materials mitigate our own heat changes depending on the day, the time, the season. So experimenting with all that stuff is very important.
If I go out in the middle of a field and I wrap myself in a big blanket of ice, technically I am camouflaging my heat temperature, my heat source, which would be my body. The problem is, if it is any warmer than freezing outside, that freezing blanket is going to show up on thermal as well. Now, the inverse could be, what if it is 90 some degrees outside and I go stand in front of a big pile of rocks that have been soaking in sunlight all day? My body temperature will match that same temperature of the rocks, more or less, and I'll be in luck. I can probably hide without really a whole ton of material pretty well. So in regards to terrain blending, you also need to consider what the temperature of your backdrop is going to be in contrast to your own body too. That thing works too well. That is screaming hot.
It's also important to note that if you're worried about a thermal optic looking at you, you should assume that you're also being looked at by the naked human eye and IR devices like night vision. If someone's coming at you with thermal, they probably have, they're probably not blind, and they probably have nods as well. So keep that in mind. For many years, while night vision was the coolest, newest thing, a lot of people thought that, oh, if I put on nods at night, I'm invisible. And they would forget to look at the ambient light around them and realize, oh, people can still see me, right? The same is true with thermal. You put on one of these, fancy blankets and you think like, oh yeah, like I'm good. It's like Harry Potter's cloak, it makes me invisible. Not at all the case. And the final thing to remember whenever it comes to thermal mitigation is that all fieldcraft and bushcraft rules still apply. There is this misperception that if you have some sort of anti-thermal material, whether it's cheap or fancy, doesn't matter. There's this perception that you can just throw it on and you're invisible to a thermal sensor. That is not at all the case. There is a lot of nuance in it, and anything that you would do to hide yourself in a visible light spectrum from a naked human eye, in terms of camouflage and foliage, all those rules still apply to any sort of thermal material that you're using.
So the last thing to remember is blending over blocking. If all we're trying to do is make sure that we are not seen, easy man, get behind a building, dig a hole, get in it, hide behind a tree, that's not necessarily a problem. But when we're talking about blending into a scenery and being able to see out of an observation post or being able to maneuver around, it becomes significantly harder. That's where some of these materials either do an excellent job or a very poor job. As an example, if I just take a wool blanket and I hold it up and I string it up into a square, yes, I am visually blocking my silhouette, my shape, and my temperature because I have airflow behind me and all that good stuff. The problem is that thermal blanket is also a specific temperature. And when we get those harsh lines of a bed sheet shape, it's going to be very easy to see that there is something geometrically not sound in this specific biome. So you need to pay attention to what it could look like on the other side as well when you are drawing harsh lines with thermal, whether it's blanket, a wool blanket, Mylar, or a poncho. So that's probably going to mean, at least out here in the woods, you need to create depth. You need to create gaps and holes. If you're setting a blanket or a poncho over yourself, you're gonna need to have some natural rises and falls, some dips, not just a perfectly flat level Ranger diamond.
So you could have like the best anti-thermal camouflage or netting or blanket or whatever, but we have to go back to another like fieldcraft basic, which is movement is the #1 killer of any camouflage, thermal camouflage included. Guys who are masters of bushcraft and fieldcraft, they can get away with having subpar camouflage because they understand how to use the environment around them. They understand how to use canopy and foliage and stuff like this. And so, I will say all of that stuff is free. If you know how to use your environment, you don't have to have anti-thermal material. Anti-thermal materials just make it easier and help you be more flexible in a wider variety of biomes and environments.
So knowing how to actually use your environment is step #1. It is not taking a blanket and throwing it over your head. It is understanding how to actually hide, and then you can start to incorporate whatever anti-thermal materials it is that you want to play with.
Now, I know everything that you just listened to is not the makings of some viral video, but we had to say those things because all of the holding up and testing stuff, it's really cool, but like you have to get that base level of understanding before you expect some device or some product to fix your thermal problem. So with all that being said, let's hop into the testing and let's show you what we're working with. Now, we are not going to reprove what many others have done. There's plenty of space blanket versus thermal videos on the internet, and they're cool, and we've watched them all, and they're dope, and we've done that stuff ourselves. Instead, we're going to take all of these items, no matter how cheap, no matter how expensive, and we're going to apply those bushcraft skills and those concepts that we just talked about to all of them. So the Mylar blanket is gonna get scrim, it's gonna get vegetation. All the way up to the fancy Relv Eclipse blanket, it's gonna get scrim, it's gonna get vegetation. We're creating actual hide sites for all of these products. Let's get into it. Before we show you the thermal stuff, it should be noted that the best time to test this stuff out is at dawn or at dusk, not at high noon, not in the middle of the night. Those are the most extreme temperature times. At dusk and at dawn, those are considered transition times for thermals. It's when the earth is either heating up or cooling down at a faster rate than your hide may be. So that's typically the time that the best tests are done on anti-thermal devices. So it is about 8-ish o'clock here in Tennessee. And as you can see, the dew and the fog is already starting to roll in. It's gonna look very similar tomorrow morning. It's gonna be filled up with fog. It is 80 degrees right now, and the humidity is 80%. It really sucked out here today, whenever it was nearly 100 and 100.
First up, setting a hide site with a $12 military net, and directly under it we have a Mylar blanket. We did spray paint it just because that shiny metallic was gonna give us away even with the naked eye, let alone I'm sure with night vision. So we put a little bit of work into it, and then we just built what would be a Ranger diamond. So it's sloping down at an angle. In theory, we should be able to hide our own body's temperature, both at eye level and from a top down, for less than $20. So I have hopes that it's actually gonna work, but I have some concerns as well.
Let's take a look at it exposed. Obviously, it's not the best camouflage choice for this biome, but the moment that we put it into the woods and we create a hide site out of it, completely disappears. I bet you probably can't even pick it out right now. Now, under white light at nighttime, it too does not show any sign of there being a hide site, or there's no Mylar reflecting, there's no mirror effect. And just for comparison, we put a fresh Mylar blanket to the left of the hide site Mylar blanket, just to show how a little bit of craftiness can go a really long way. Now under night vision, it completely disappears. And this is true with pretty much everything under night vision if you know what you're doing in the woods, and if you have even a little bit of field or bushcraft skills under your belt. Night vision and IR light has a lot of trouble pushing past any sort of vegetation. So the moment you add vegetation to your hide site, or the moment you create any sort of depth, you're at a huge advantage. When we kick on thermal, we can see it clearly covers his heat signature. However, the moment there's any sort of movement or it drapes over his body, it reflects the heat around it. A Mylar blanket is just a giant mirror. It's reflecting heat sources. It's not even absorbing heat sources. It's just reflecting them back towards the camera. So once we look at the hide site in the woods, well, there must be some sort of heat source. Yes, we're filming this at dusk, but it's still reflecting a little bit of heat from up high. So that's Josh's leg poking out of the bottom left. But what's on top is a completely air-gapped Mylar blanket that's covered. So he's not touching it, it's just radiating, it's reflecting the heat that's above it. And as you can see, he pops out of the hide, but where the hide is broadside to the thermal optic, it's very well hidden. Now from the drone perspective, we can see Josh poking out of the bottom of his hide a little bit, but we're not seeing that red hot reflection. And that's because we simply have a different color palette on this particular drone. This is a good case for if you do have a thermal to be very well versed and very fast at being able to change modes. Just because you don't see something on thermal on a first, second, or even third pass doesn't mean there's nothing there. You need to be able to switch through all of your color palettes in an efficient manner in order to really get a good grasp of what you're looking at and what you are or you're not seeing. In this particular case, we are on white hot mode, not red hot mode, which is why we can't see those extremely high temperature spikes that the Mylar blanket is reflecting. Now this is what it looks like from 100 yards away, and that's Nick piloting the drone over on the left, so disregard him. But from here, you can't see anything. And this was true with every hide we built, no matter the price of it or how cool it was. So why would we even show you what it looks like at this distance, considering you can't see anything? It's important to note that anti-thermal hides are tested at 2 key distances. For handheld, helmet, or rifle-mounted thermal optics, testing is done at around 400 yards, which is considered a close engagement range since getting any nearer without being spotted is unlikely. But for drones, hides must withstand scrutiny at just 20 yards due to how easily drones can approach, reposition, and exploit even the smallest gaps in your thermal concealment. One very cool thing about this setup though is that if you get up close to a Mylar blanket, you can see through it, even with netting on the other side, and that is something that you don't always get with every kind of hide site.
All right, next we have a Pendleton wool blanket. It's about a $100 wool blanket. And I've seen a lot on the internet, a lot of people saying wool does a really good job of both dumping heat as well as reflecting some of your heat, even if it's wet. Could be a really good idea, but wool has not seen its way specifically onto the battlefield when people have enough finances to really invest in anti-thermal. So while I hope it works, I once again have some concerns.
So in both daytime and nighttime, it is pretty easy to pick this wool blanket out. I think that's mainly due to the pattern on it. So you could swap that out with any kind of just standard OD green or tan colored wool blanket and it would probably be just fine. Under night vision, going back to the issue that IR light has with any sort of vegetation or canopy, it's basically invisible. Now, once we get up to the thermal test, as you can tell, certain parts of that blanket have been exposed to the sky for a little bit longer, so it tends to retain the heat a little bit more, and you could actually physically touch that and feel a little bit of the heat that it is holding in. The rate at which it absorbs heat, though, is actually pretty slow. If you notice, it's not even changing colors where Josh's head is actually physically touching it, but right here, this is going to be a time lapse. So Josh is sitting under the sun for about 3 minutes. And as you can tell, the longer he sits under that thing, the more the heat tends to spread, especially at his head where it's actually making physical contact. Now, from the drone perspective, it works very well. You have a little bit of canopy, a little bit of vegetation, because now it is in the actual hide site configuration, not just something that you're holding up to a camera, not just something you're throwing over yourself and looking at from 10 feet away, but a realistic drone view with a little bit of bushcraft goes a very, very long way. We have several examples of how Josh basically disappears behind this thing with even the most minimal amount of vegetation between him and the thermal optic. One thing we should point out is how handy it would be to carry an e-tool with you out into the field, because you can easily set up your thermal hide and then start to dig down to give yourself even more standoff from that fabric, and you can use it to build up the sides of your hide. So for example, if a drone rotates and can see a little bit underneath of your hide, well, if you took a little bit of time and built that up with some extra earth, well, you'd be solid.
All right, we have a standard poncho. These are not super expensive ponchos, but in theory, because it is up off the ground, we should have some of that good airflow. And the good news is if you're buying a military style poncho, it's probably gonna be somewhat camouflaged. So the concern is the fact that it is waterproof, or it's supposed to be water repellent. Is it going to pass under the IR spectrum? That's one of my concerns. Additionally, because it is set up like a Ranger Diamond, we have some of those harsh lines that we talked about before that you typically want to stay away from. So directly next to it, we have a Marpat poncho with a whole ton of scrim and foliage sitting on top of it. We trimmed a bunch of stuff and laid it over the top. Honestly, even from where I am, a couple feet away, it's still fairly hard to see. So I have good hopes that that's actually going to work. So what you're saving here is finances. What you have to do, in theory, in order to make it more thermal camouflage, is a ton of work. It took a lot of time to actually make this look like it blended into the environment.
So if you get ponchos with like this little eyelet right here, again, to mask these harsh lines, they actually kind of come in handy. You can take some twigs and shove them down in there and kind of drape over it, and it's just a nice little field hack. It works. When ponchos are completely exposed like this, they don't really pass the viz check, though when you do get them in brush and foliage and under canopy, they start to blend a lot better. Like even right here, you can see the M81, even out in the open, looks pretty dang good. And the Marpat one, which is actually vegged up, looks fantastic. You can't even tell it's there. Under night vision, you can see those outlines of the exposed M81 poncho, but the one that is actually in the brush, even just slightly, completely disappears. This is going to be a trend that you're going to see over and over and over again, basically regardless of what material it is you're using. Heck, you could even just stand behind some of this stuff and you would be invisible. Night vision is not the superpower people make it out to be. But under thermal, we see some interesting things. At a glance, a poncho actually blends pretty well in addition to blocking. But once you throw it on, you'll start to see the things that kind of become issues. Number one, if it touches your body, it transfers the heat super fast. This is not time lapse. This is in real time, and within seconds of Josh touching it, it starts to heat up at his hands, at his head, basically anywhere that touches him. Now, from the drone perspective, we can spot a poncho out exposed in a field. But more than anything, it's those harsh lines that we see first, that total discrepancy in a right angle configuration with the environment around him. But you'll also notice that his body temperature, even though there's some standoff and some airflow, it will start to heat up that poncho to the point where it kind of glows in an unnatural way. Even from about 50 to 100 feet out on the drone, it's very apparent that there is something abnormal in the area. But let's take a look at the poncho that actually has some bushcraft applied to it. It has some vegetation added to it. It's put behind a very thin layer of veg in front of it as well, so you've got a little bit of depth. It absolutely disappears. You cannot see it. Even with rotations, it's hard to spot. The heat that you are seeing is simply because we didn't run it all the way to the ground on one side, so that is one thing to take note of. Again, building up some of those edges to protect your exposed areas. And even over time, as the poncho starts to heat up and trap some of that heat, with the vegetation added, it kind of breaks it up. You don't quite know what you're looking at. It doesn't look as abnormal as the one that's completely exposed. Overall, a poncho is actually a pretty great resource that can double as a thermal barrier if you had to use it. Just make sure that you apply all the principles that we've talked about, because it is not perfect. This also shows you how effective a poncho is at keeping you warm at night. You may think that just a little bit of coverage is not going to make a big difference. It absolutely does. You can tell how it traps Josh's heat after only being in there for like a minute or two.
Next, we have the Heretic cold-blooded hide. Now, something that's interesting about this specific anti-thermal blanket is that there are two pieces of anti-thermal mesh that are sewn on top of each other. So in theory, you could shove a whole bunch of twigs and sticks and even grass and build that up almost like a pillow and start to create an air pocket that sits above you. So even if your back or your shoulders are touching the blanket, you could have some natural lift off from your body in order to dump some of that thermal temperature. Even still, this is designed to be a blanket for a hide, and so we set it up that way. Once again, building it out with foliage as if we were building our own OP, our own hide site. And I am curious, being that this is the heaviest option, but also at the $300 price point, it's fairly competitive for being designed as an anti-thermal blanket. How it's actually going to do.
So one of the cool things about this one that I really liked is that the outside layer has cuts in it, laser cuts in it. So in terms of attaching vegetation, it was super easy to collect a bunch of different types of plants, get them all piled up together in their own separate piles, and then just be able to shove them down in there. And if I was afraid they were going to fall out, I could zip tie one. And so by the time, if you work your way from the top to the bottom, you can use the veg to actually cover up the attachment points of the veg above it. So overall, this one is like very, very cool, and I'm pretty impressed by it. But again, like let's see what it looks like. Oh, one more cool thing about the Heretic Cold-Blooded is because it is 2 layers of mesh and there's nothing solid there, you can actually see through it. If you put your eye up to it, you can still see at a distance. We could see a spotting area at 600 meters away, which is pretty cool. And that is not something that you get with the options that we showed you before this. Now the Heretic has 2 layers. The bottom layer is Ranger. The top layer, which is cut up and scrimmed out, is multicam. And when you shove that veg in there, man, you just disappear. It is insanely good. I will say that we veg this one up more than any other product by a long shot. So it just really shows you how well vegetation works in conjunction with all this stuff. Here it is in the hide configuration. You can't really tell where it is except for down there at the bottom where I left a little bit of a gap for me to look under and shoot through. At night, it completely, you can't see it. There's a slight shadow cast at the very bottom where that gap is, but otherwise it's gone. You're not seeing it. Under night vision, again, the man-made gap there is the only thing noticeable. But if you're not just absolutely looking for it, you can't see it. Under night vision, it is, I guess, technically NIR compliant. The power of night vision is negated once you really understand bushcraft or even just basic fieldcraft. Now, kicking on the thermal, that's where this thing really shines if it hasn't already. The vegetation does a nice job of breaking stuff up. But this does a pretty darn good job of blending and not just blocking. If you notice, he throws it over his head. It starts to look like a part of the environment apart from a couple of little hot spots, which is going to be expected with anything that is mesh. Anything that is breathable and see-through, you're going to have a little bit of, you're going to be able to see a little bit of heat through. But even just taking a knee, Josh is, unless you are 10 feet away, which I currently am while I'm filming this, you're not going to see him. Remember, when we're judging things from a rifle-mounted or head-mounted thermal optic, a 20-foot comparison is not, it's not a fair test. But even though I am so close, this thing does incredibly well. And quite frankly, it should, being that it costs more money. It is much heavier than any of the other options by far, and we vegged the absolutely living daylights out of it. Yeah, it works great. The hide side itself under thermal looks great. Yes, there's a little bit of heat that can emanate through some of the mesh, but not much. Now, when Josh places his hand on it, granted he's pushing up, you can see the heat of his hand through that mesh, and that goes back to airflow and standoff. That's why we stress airflow and standoff whenever using or creating hides. Now, here we have Josh getting into the hindsight. I'm zipping away on the bike. Looks silly. We did leave one side of this hide exposed because we had a lot of trouble finding him, even under thermal. So we're going to pan to the side, show you what that looks like. And as we come back, as you can see, he pretty much disappears. There's a few little heat leaks, especially down there at the bottom. Again, that was a design choice so that we could see better through the underneath side of it. But was kind of unnecessary considering we can see through the mesh to begin with. But as we zoom out with the drone, it just becomes nothing. It becomes basically just a little blip, like a rock. I would never think to zoom up on that one little spot when there's so many other things out in the woods that can look similar. But this is a good reminder of the capabilities of a drone and why you should go above and beyond in terms of creating your hide site, because they can get very close. They can rotate quickly and they can see any gap or any imperfection in what you've created. So the fact that we're 100 feet out and we can't even see the hide, there's nothing suspicious. It means that the chances of the drone locking into a position and zooming up on it to find any little imperfection at 10 feet away is pretty much not going to happen. So this is a great setup for a hide.
Finally, guys, we have the Relv Eclipse Gen 2. Now, this blanket is the smallest, most lightweight, packable. It's also the most expensive, but it is currently the anti-thermal blanket that is fielded by some of the top tier, hardest hitting dudes that are concerned about hiding from thermal on modern battle spaces. So now something else that sets this blanket apart, the Relv, is the fact that it is so lightweight and breathable. So previously when I was wearing a Mylar blanket in the video, man, I had that chimney effect. I could just feel that heat trying to rush out of the blanket. Whereas it's a super hot, humid evening, and when I throw this Relv blanket on, it doesn't feel like it's trapping heat the same way. Because it is printed and designed, the camo patterns are designed by Relv, they're able to actually do reversible sides. So here in Tennessee, it's really lush and green right now, but give it a couple months and it's gonna be dark browns and tans. And so we could get a blanket that's printed green and tan, or you could choose to select something that is painted or camoed white and dark greens, depending on your biome and depending on where you live.
Okay, so for the Relv Eclipse Gen 2, we did apply a moderate amount of scrim and vegetation, not much though, and only on one side, not both sides. We chose the side that fit our biome the best. And as you can see in the hide configuration, it blends super well. We actually didn't put very much depth at all between the hide and the outside, or our naked eyes. This was the most exposed of the hides that we're showing you, so we didn't give it any advantage. Under IR, it looks great. There is virtually no reflectivity, especially compared to its surroundings. That's one of the big things about the woods and vegetation. Vegetation is not necessarily NIR compliant. So, but this looks great under night vision. Now, as Josh climbs into the hide that we made a very small hide. Again, very exposed compared to all the other options. And you can see a faint glint of his heat popping through, and that's purely because it is a mesh. It is a type of mesh. It is extremely lightweight. And that's because this particular product is designed to be used as both a hide and on body, which we will get to here in a little bit. As he touches it with his hand, it doesn't transfer the heat. Notice you can only see his heat through it because he's pushing right up against it, but as soon as he pulls his hand away, all that heat dissipates. So from up close, you can kind of see a little bit, but not something that would really stick out unless you're right up on someone, at which point you have been revealed. Now at distance with the drone, as you can see, we're starting out far and wide. We're moving in a little closer, and as we get closer and closer, you start to see little specks, but nothing that's really out of place considering that the rest of the forest and the rest of the vegetation has little specks of heat like that as well. So when we pan to the side, we're just doing that to show you where he is. You can obviously see his heat signature there, but as we pull back out to 50 feet, 100 feet, you can't really tell what's going on. I mean, you have so much variation in terms of the contrast. It's only in the spots where his leg is sticking out that you can really tell what is going on. Pulling the drone back even further, this is about 75 feet, and it's non-existent. If we didn't start focused on the point at which he was, you would not know where he was at. So overall, it absolutely passes the viz test with an added bonus of you can have two different kinds of camouflages. It passes the NIR test, it passes low light test, and at realistic ranges, it passes the thermal test 10 out of 10. At unrealistic distances, you can see some heat through the cracks. But again, if someone is that close to notice you, they too have been revealed. And keep in mind, we did not veg this up as much as we could have. If we were to do this again, we would probably add as much vegetation to this as we added to the Heretic and to the Poncho. And I bet it would have cut down on even those little tiny gaps. Now, this is all very impressive considering how lightweight this fabric is and how great and how well it wears on you. I mean, you can put this on and you don't even feel it, which is really what we need to talk about next, because that is where the Relv Eclipse truly shines in contrast to all the other options that we've shown, is that it's something you can literally throw over your head and wear over your back in the field, and it mitigates your thermal signature. Now, as Josh throws this up and over his body, you'll notice those contact points where his hands are touching. As soon as he pulls them away, the heat dissipates. And again, from up close, you can see some chinks in the armor. However, this is still incredibly great. Notice how it blends. It doesn't do a 10 out of 10 at blocking at 20 feet, but it does do a 10 out of 10 of blending at 20 feet. Now, Josh is wearing a helmet in the last clip. On this one, it's just his bare head, and as he throws it over his body, you'll start to notice the transfer of that heat, specifically where his head is, because he's not wearing a helmet, he's not wearing a ball cap, there's nothing there. This is a very thin fabric, so of course his heat is going to come through that. But once he pulls it off of his head, it actually dissipates extremely fast. And notice how the heat is not spreading. Even while wearing it for prolonged periods of time, the heat does not spread like it does with, say, the Poncho. You can see where the contact points were on his back, and as soon as he throws it off, boom, it's back to normal. This is one of the things that impressed us the most with this Relv fabric, is that as we used it and as we moved around with it, it tended to act more like a chameleon than any other fabric that we had. And that is with minimal vegetation, which is super nice. Now, this is at about 125 yards. Josh is getting ready to throw on the Relv Eclipse Gen 2, and you're going to see how at that distance he completely disappears. And this is actually a realistic engagement distance, much unlike 20 feet. The ability to quickly throw this on is really what separates it from the rest of the pack and from other products that do defeat thermal but come with a lot of cons. The fact that you could hear a drone coming and quickly run to some trees or to a cluster of vegetation, pull it on over you, and just sit there is a big plus. Not to mention the fact that it checks all the boxes. It passes the Viz test, like right here in the middle of the woods. This camo isn't actually perfectly suited for our biome, but it still does a really good job, and we could always add tons of vegetation to make it match perfectly. For example, Josh just right here, there's not even any depth. He's barely in the woods, and he can pull it up, and with the minimal amount of veg that we've added, he already kind of disappears. Now, granted, he is backlit in that position, so we moved him over a little bit, and still he disappears. And whichever way he turns, whether he's frontal facing or rear facing, he's gone. And a quick pan over the area in which he's at, you can't see him at all, but he is actually completely exposed. Not to mention you can shoot through this and see through it with a magnified optic or even a red dot, which kind of puts this in a class of its own, being that it's really good for everything. It's not perfect at everything, but it's like a 9 out of 10 in every category. So if you're in the field actually needing to use stuff and you're not just in a static position, this is the play. And because it's so breathable and lightweight, you don't get that chimney effect that you get with other thermal mitigation devices. You throw it on, you don't even feel it. You don't even know it's on you. So what about ghillie suits? After all, if bushcraft is so powerful versus thermal, shouldn't they be effective? Absolutely. And that's where ProApto comes in with their multispectral lineup of ghillies. While this version isn't technically for thermal, it still does a great job, especially when you add vegetation. It does come built in with heavy-duty rubber bands all over it, so to veg it up, it's not that difficult, especially to get it to the point where it passes the Viz test. Now, this is just the Viper Hood variant, which we have on loan from Sentinel Armament. We could add arms and a cape and a front panel to extend the coverage and make it a full ghillie stalking suit that would absolutely crush under every spectrum, whether that be Viz, NIR, or thermal. But for a ghillie, this wears really, really well. It's entirely waterproof, so it's not going to weigh 10,000 pounds if you get wet. And as you can see under thermal, where it does cover, it does mitigate the thermal signature. So building this out to be a full suit is definitely one of our next steps. And finally, we have the WetWrx Wraith. We have a ton of hours with the Wraith. It's one of our favorite ways to add a bit of camo to basically any kind of kit. It's not rated for thermal, but it does do a decent job of mitigating your signature on top of it being a lightweight and very packable and affordable option. We use zip ties to add a bit of vegetation, and as you can see under thermal, it does cut down on those heat leaks without causing us to actually overheat underneath it. Once again, this really goes to show that even without specialty crafted anti-thermal gear, you can reduce your thermal signature with a bit of time and craftiness in the field. And that really is the point we hope we've driven home throughout all of these examples. You can buy your way towards greater flexibility in thermal reduction, but with ingenuity and fieldcraft, you can counter thermal in an effective way, even if your budget is next to nothing. So coming out of that, guys, I hope that we've demonstrated what our experience has been, which is hiding from thermal is not as hard as you may think, but it's also not as easy as just throwing something on, whether it's a cheap DIY option or even an expensive specialty built material or fabric.
Yeah, the assumption that thermal is the all-seeing eye of Sauron may be true if someone is standing out in the open, but if they're actively trying to hide, even at 100 yards, which is where our rifles are zeroed at, it's not that easy to just pick someone out. And if you can see some temperature, if they're actively trying to hide, you still can't identify, is that a human, is that a warm rock? So it doesn't actually take all that much to hide, clearly. Now, you guys may have been surprised by how cheap materials that are not designed as anti-thermal still did a pretty good job at hiding our signature. And I'll be honest, it surprised us a little bit too. But the caveat here is that you need to pay attention to what materials and what equipment is actively being taken into war zones by guys who are literally up against life or death, depending on if someone can see them with thermal. Now, I'll also state this as well. If you're using less than ideal equipment, it can still be done. You can still hide from thermal. The trade-off is you're gonna have to be putting a little bit more brain power and time and energy into building a hide or covering yourself with some of those Mylar blankets or wool blankets. It can still be done, but you're gonna have to sacrifice time. And for some people, time is not an option when they're actually out there on a battlefield.
Yeah, when you think about the money side of it, you know, we showed you $20 options and, you know, $50 options with the wool blanket or a $40 poncho, and they worked really well, especially when combined with the bushcraft. but not all of those items are field friendly. That's the other part you have to think about this. There's a reason why you don't see dudes running around with Mylar blankets. There's a reason why you don't see dudes running around with wool blankets, especially in the summer, and it's because they're not field friendly. The Mylar rips, like it's a one-time use thing, man.
It didn't even last a night.
It didn't even last a night. The wool blanket, you know, in the winter might actually be a great option. Right now, it's a terrible option. So that's, you know, you have these cheap options that are like 90% good at 2 of the 6 things that you really need in a field-ready thermal mitigation device. Whereas you have something like Relv or even the Heretic, the $300 and $500 price points, you know, you're paying a lot more. However, there's a reason why guys who are actually concerned about not dying to thermal use stuff like that. It's worth it to spend the money on that, because while it may not completely block your signature in every single situation, it is 90% good at 6 out of 6 things, whereas the cheap options are like 100% good at like 2 of the 6. Ultimately, what it comes down to, regardless of DIY cheap or specialty built expensive stuff, improper use compromises you. If you use it the wrong way, doesn't matter how cool the thing is, you're done.
And the same could be true for any form of equipment, whether it's night vision or you're setting up a poncho for a shelter. If you're improperly using the equipment, or you don't have the head knowledge, the foundational understanding of how that tool is used or how it could be used against you, yeah, then you're not getting its full potential out of it, and it could get you in trouble. Which is why it's important to go out and do some of your own testing. This is one test on one evening in our biome with a certain dew point and temperature, and if you go do all these same tests, you may start to see some different results. And I would encourage you guys to not just have a piece of thermal and then hold up a blanket in front of you in your backyard and go, wow, that works or that doesn't, because that's not necessarily how that would be used or employed. So be careful to test for yourself in scenarios where you might find yourself actually using it.
Yeah, all of this was just one data point. The Falcon Claw guys, they have a phenomenal YouTube channel where they test thermal and night vision devices with hundreds of data points. So everything that you saw here, don't just take our word for it. Watch other people's stuff. Test things out for yourself. Look at how things look in different biomes. Like the Falcon Claw guys, they're over in Eastern Europe, and it's cold there mostly. Their hottest day is like 70 or 80 degrees.
Fahrenheit, because those guys would be like, what?
Yeah.
It'd be boiling if it was Celsius.
Yeah, they make like our favorite thermal content on the internet by far, and we've learned a lot from those dudes, and you should go check them out. They just did a summer video, and I will rib them a little bit. They're like, yeah, it's hot here. It's like 80 degrees, and I was like, brother. So with that, guys, we appreciate you watching. We appreciate your time. We hope you've learned a lot and have had some fun along the way. If you're looking to get our content early and with no ads whatsoever, you can hit up Patreon. We've got a pretty cool community there, and we learn a lot from those guys, probably more than they learn from us, just from the comment section there. Hit it up, and with that being said, we'll catch you next week.
Straight out of my...
Drew, get up! Drew!
I'm good.
All right, stay down. I'm gonna try to see if I can find him. I said get up, and then I said stay down.
Get up.
Get up! Stay down. We gotta do that over.
Okay.
Get this off me. Oh, get... Oh,
Stay low. Dang, dude.
That's fine. I like it. I leave it.